Light mechs are easy. When you're in range, when you've got a target, you fire. You're firing off a light laser, maybe some short-range missiles, maybe some machine guns, maybe some small lasers, maybe an autocannon. You don't have to worry about heat. You really don't have to worry about anything. And if you're playing in a single-player game or a one-mission battle, is ammunition really a question? So then we jump into medium mechs. Now you've got a little bite. You've got a primary weapon, usually an autocannon 10 or maybe a PPC. And then the secondary weapons now have a little bit more bite. Maybe you've got an LRM 10 or you've got abrasive medium lasers. You've got something with some bite. When we jump into heavies and especially assaults, not with all mechs, but with most mechs, now we have a variety of weapons. And this is where new players to Battletech kind of wonder what the heck is going on. Because I have all these weapons, but the design for the most part on these machines, I'm not able to effectively fire them at all. Or in some cases, I can't fire them at all because I'll shut down for heat. Or my mech might explode, the ammunition inside. So what is the point? So the duality of this vlog for the new players to Battletech, especially as we jump into the heavies and assaults, is exploring this idea of not only heat management, but understanding that when you have all these weapons, it's a calculation of possibilities. So what I mean by that is, let's say we're at long range and I have a PPC and I've got some long range missiles. When I'm at long range, I can possibly fire both of these. Maybe I fire one and then the other. Maybe I fire both and push the heat. But as my opponent approaches and gets closer and closer, assuming I'm not just like static standing there, now I'm running the calculation where I can hit with the PPC effectively. I can hit with the long-range missiles effectively, We get even closer, and now if we're dealing with minimums, I have to make those calculations and say, yes, I could fire my long-range missiles. Potentially they can do a lot more damage, if it's an LRM 15 or a 20. But now with those modifiers or what's going on, I would be better off switching to a different range weapon. Maybe I'm better off switching to those medium lasers. Or flip that, right? I'm going to have you at long-range missile distance. I'm going to fire the LRM 20 pack. You get closer. Now you're in long range, extreme range for my medium lasers. I can still tag you with the missiles. I don't want to switch to those medium lasers yet because the modifiers to hit based on range, plus my movement, plus possibly my opponent's movement, it's too high for the heat. So having all these weapons in the heavies and the assaults means taking a look at ranges, crunching the modifiers, and be willing to have an appropriate risk. I say appropriate because many games of Battletech, I'm aware of best Battletech practices, and I'm going to be pushing up a few vlogs exploring best practices. This is kind of the standard stuff you want to do. When you deviate from this, depending on your risk tolerance, things get a lot more interesting, meaning there are times I will blast everything off and put myself at risk for heat or other areas of the game. But I'm doing it to try and cause damage. I'm doing it for the lulls. I'm doing it just to see what happens. I'm aware of the tactica for it. Where you get into trouble as a new player is there's these background mechanics which you're learning, you're working on, you're exploring. And if you're not aware, all of a sudden, you're kind of behind with possibilities with what you can do. And if your opponent has forward momentum, they can quickly push over you. The other aspect we see with having all these weapons, and I've explored this and I've pushed it up to the Battletech playlist here, but I'm going to framework it a little bit. The Alpha Strike, or this idea of a sudden surge of weapons. If I have all these weapons, I don't have to fire them all. I might not be capable of firing them all. But if I do fire them all, or if I push above average, I have the potential in that turn to cripple or really damage a machine. So an opposing mech or vehicles too, if it's total warfare, combined arms. So what I'm looking for is the opportunity. If you're at long range, I'm not really going to fire everything off and push that heat. If you're at close range and you're fully gassed up and you've got good armor, I'm not going to fire all those weapons because I'll do some damage, but I'll put myself at risk, especially if you have heat control. But if we find ourselves at close range and you've got some internal damage or your arm is barely hanging on, I might push that because that's a chance to kind of preempt you and get that advantage over you and cripple you. And yes, I've pushed the heat and I've made myself less effective for a turn or two while I clear the heat, but I've caused significant damage for you. To you. Another example, I mean, it happens. We try our best. If I can get a light mech and catch that light mech at close range or effective range, where now I can potentially push that heat and either cripple, blow the legs off, or flat out destroy that light mech. This might be my chance to do it. And in return, what's it really going to do to me that much? I mean, I guess it could do death from above if it has jump jets, but sometimes you will fire at a target because this is a chance to cripple it. If there's some hovercraft zipping around and here's my chance because it's close and it had to cross that part of the city tech, and I can hit it, I will try to tag it with everything. Because if I take it out, now I have the advantage of initiative. It's one less piece that my opponent has. So knowing when to push the heat, knowing when to utilize all your weapons, thinking as a new player, the weapons are a possibility. They're a possibility. And this is important to be able to see those possibilities, either setting them up directly with your lance or, I won't say hanging back or hanging out, but looking around and waiting for your opponent to offer you those possibilities. That is when you will utilize all these weapons, in addition to understanding the different range brackets.